You can't expect to be a top sales performer in 2021 by following yesterday's best practices. And with so much competing for your buyer's attention, you need to make every touch count to get the most out of your prospecting efforts. As the Director of Execution and Evolution at J. Barrow Sales Training, Morgan J. Ingram focuses on giving sales development teams the tools and tactics they need to enhance their skill set and stay ahead of their competition. Since launching his YouTube series, the SDR Chronicles, in 2016, Morgan has posted more than 150 videos providing SDRs with motivation and real-world advice. He now hosts Muffins with Morgan, a weekly live stream on Twitch where he answers questions about all things sales every Saturday morning. Morgan has been named a top 25 sales development thought leader by Inside Sales and one of LinkedIn's top sales voices for 2018, 2019, and 2020. Joined now by Nutshell's head of content and communications, Ben Goldstein. Please give a warm welcome to one of our most trusted voices in sales education, Morgan J. Ingram.
Hey, Morgan. Thanks so much for being here.
What's happening?
When we first started putting this event together, you were one of the first people I reached out to. I always love watching you do Q&As like this. And I feel like I've learned so much about sales outreach just from following you on LinkedIn. But before we get into some of those prospecting tips that you're famous for, let's give our viewers a little context. Where do you come from? How did you get into sales? How did that become your career path?
Where did I come from? So not like from like Mars, Saturn. Actually, an alien. So here's the thing. I born and raised Atlanta, Georgia. Very rare. That doesn't ever really happen where people still stay in Atlanta. And also as well, I went to Auburn for a year and a half, then transferred from there, then went to University of Georgia, where I graduated with finance and sports management. Now, the reason that that's so important is because I wanted to originally be a sports agent. So I had no intention of ever getting into sales and doing what I'm doing today. And at the end of the senior year, I had to make a decision on what I wanted to do. I realized finance, sports management, and sports agency wasn't for me, but I committed 4 years to that. So I was really bummed that it's not what I ended up doing. So then after networking and talking with different people, I ultimately ended up cold calling to get a sales job. And that's how I started off as being an SDR. And long story short here, started a YouTube channel called the SDR Chronicles, which was in that intro. And then that naturally progressed into me being an SDR manager, where I managed 13 reps. And the team scaled super fast to where we were growing. And I was creating so much content that I got approached by John Barrows, which most people in the B2B tech space knows who that is. Trained clients like Salesforce, Google, and Slack. And he approached me to join his team 3 years ago. And so I've been doing training and coaching for teams on how to build pipeline, how to be innovative and creative to break through the noise in the marketplace. And that is in a nutshell exactly what I'm all about.
Great. Yeah. You mentioned the SDR Chronicles YouTube channel. That was not just a springboard for your career, but it kind of put you on this path to being a public figure in sales. When you first started making these videos, uploading them into YouTube, what were you trying to get out of that? What was the original goal?
So to even go back, like I never wanted to create content. I never wanted to be a person. Funny enough, I wanted to just be behind the scenes and make money. Like freshman year, they asked me like, "Hey, what's your major?" I asked, "What makes the most money?" And they said finance. So I picked finance. That's literally how I got to finance. Like it was that straightforward. Obviously, I've changed since then. And the whole reason I started the SDR Chronicles is because I saw a gap in the marketplace. There was no SDR. There was no SDR leader. There was no sales content. For the most part, all the sales content was from trainers or coaches or consultants. So I decided to take the leap and be one of the first people to be a individual contributor, posting content to the platform to provide context to a role where most people have no idea what's going on. First job, like it was out of college for me, or second or third job. And I wanted to be able to educate the marketplace. And that's why I started it.
Yeah, yeah. And I do want to talk a little more later about how you use online content to stand out individually. But let's get into the meat of today's topic, which is about breaking through the noise in prospecting. And we all know there's a lot competing for our prospects' attention, and it doesn't help when you're using the same tone, the same channels as everybody else. So let's start with LinkedIn, which is something you probably write a book about. My basic understanding is that LinkedIn outreach is something you do to supplement a cold call or a cold email. Is that how you see it? When and why do you send that LinkedIn connection or that DM?
Yeah. So the very first step in an outbound campaign that I tell people to focus on is sending a LinkedIn connection request. Now, some people may think differently, but I'm going to give you the reason why this is important. So when you send a LinkedIn connection request as the first step, now you're putting a face to the name. They're going to see your name in an email and be like, oh, that's Morgan. They're going to get a call from you and be like, oh, I saw that connection request. Now, is this a silver bullet? No, right? That's not the case. However, this is a very unique tactic to help you stand out. And what we found is by sending a blank note, which means adding nothing in your connection request and sending it, that leads to people engaging with you more. And once they accept you, you could do a LinkedIn video or a voice note and other things that we're probably going to talk about in this conversation. So that's why I'm starting off with the LinkedIn connection request. The more I can start building my network of people that are in my ecosystem that I can one sell to, two are partners, or three I can get referrals from, the better it's going to be for me. And I'm going to be able to close more deals, schedule more meetings, because I'm building a network of people that can utilize my service, and also I can build genuine relationships with as well.
Yeah, so that's a really important distinction. So the purpose is not to, set up some time on your calendar right then in that moment. It's just to sort of get your face, your name into the prospect's head. Is that about right?
Exactly. And you want to stay away from connected pitching. Like, I think everyone probably listening in, I'd be curious, like if someone wants to chime in, like how many connected pitches do you get a day? I would be curious to see that in the chat if you guys want to fill that in. And it's becoming more and more aggressive. So you don't want to be like that, right? You don't want to connect with someone and be like, hey, here's my value vomit pitch. Like, nobody wants that, right? So that's something just to pay attention to there.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, even if there's no note attached, you still see some engagement from these connections. And I was just wondering, is there a better response from just sending a LinkedIn DM connection than sending a cold email in your experience?
So the really whole goal here is once I get connected, which is the context here, the next step is, yes, I'm sending emails. Yes, I'm sending calls. If I'm understanding correctly, though, is to send videos and to do a voice note. A lot of people will just get text in their inbox and they're like, what the heck is this? So if I'm able to do a LinkedIn video, if I'm able to do a LinkedIn voice message, that's great. You can also leverage your calls and send and have the voicemails refer to LinkedIn. Hey, reason for my voicemail, whatever you say, I wanted to send you a video on LinkedIn, and I just did that. So check it out in the next 5 minutes. So now what you're doing is you're proactively telling them that something is coming so that they can absorb it. So that's another way that you can use LinkedIn as another touch point.
Yeah. Personalization is always important in cold outreach. If I'm the buyer, it shows me you care enough to at least Google me. But you can always tell when it's a little lazy. If a sales rep compliments you on literally the last thing you posted on LinkedIn, you can kind of see through that right away. They did the bare minimum effort.
Yep.
So how do you structure a cold outreach message on LinkedIn or in these videos? What kind of personalization do you include in those things?
So I do have a formula. Before we go into the formula, let's talk about the personalization. One thing to keep in mind is that you just don't want to be personalized to be personalized. And so what I mean by that is, let's say I noticed that you went to the University of Tennessee, and I start off my email with "Go Vols, saw you all played last night," etc. But it doesn't tie to my value prop, and I immediately just swing to it by saying, "Hey, go Vols, great game last night. We're the leading provider." And it's like, what? Like that, like that's not personalization. And I feel like some people think that that is. What personalization is tying in something that you found and then making it relevant to whatever you offer. And you have to make sure that that ties together, because if it doesn't tie together, you're just sending another personalized email to say that you're being personalized. And it's a waste of time. If you want to use that Tennessee information and you feel like you can't tie it in, use it in the PS, right? Write a good email and then do PS vols, or do a video and then at the end mention what you might have found in the personalization piece. The most critical component of this is being relevant to the buyer and knowing what are they dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Now, I mentioned that there's a formula, so let's talk about it. The formula is super simple, and it's called 10, 30, 10. All right, so anybody can start using this formula today. And the reason it's called 10, 30, 10 is because I break that up into seconds. So 10 seconds, 30 seconds, and 10 seconds. I want people to walk away after this conversation to be like, I can make my videos, I can do voice messages in a very timely manner. So if I'm able to make sure that I'm sending a video that's going to get more replies and things of that nature, then that's going to help me move myself in the right direction. So let's talk about what the formula is. So typically you want to have a video be 45 to 60 seconds. In the first 10 seconds, you're going to state the reason on what your video is about. Maybe you found something on the website that's applicable. Maybe you checked out a 10K report. Maybe on their LinkedIn profile, they worked at a previous company that is a client. So many different things, right? But the whole thing at the end of the day is you want to focus on what is the reason that you're reaching out with this video. The reason for my video is X. You want to be confident in your approach so that the other person can be confident in what you're telling them. Now, once you've done that, it's the 30 seconds. And the 30 seconds is the value prop. And the value prop can be obtained from your cold calls and your emails already. So you'll notice this all comes together. And it's basically what you're offering. So, hey, we offer sales training that focuses on improving your cold calling confidence and your objection handling techniques. That would be an example of a value prop. Last 10 seconds is the call to action. Typically, when you're doing a call to action, you don't want to directly ask for time. You don't want to ask for 30 minutes because everyone else is asking for 30 minutes. So you have to figure out, how can I be unique? How can I stand out? One of the things you can do is called an interest call to action supported by Gong, and say, hey, would you be open to learning more? Are you interested in deeper dialogue? These are things that you can do to start getting more meetings that we've seen in working with different clients and different mentees that I have. So those are the things that you can start doing now to start seeing success.
That's gold. I hope everyone was paying attention for that formula. I want to talk about prospecting tools just for a minute. What are your tools of choice for finding potential buyers in the first place? So let's say you have a team of SDRs and an outbound operation. What software tools or subscriptions would you equip them with to generate those good leads in the first place?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I'll answer Ron's question from LinkedIn. This is all based on data, Ron. So we took 4 different reps targeting 4 different personas in different industries. We ran a 50 by 50. So we did 50 blank notes and 50 personalized notes. We found that the 50 blank notes across the industries and the personas had a higher acceptance rate. So I didn't think that was going to happen, but I can't look at the data, and it's the data, right? I can't refute it. So what my belief is that people who just say, hello, I'd like to add you to my professional network. Typically when people have that as a connection request, it ends up being a huge spam anyways. And I think that people, when they see a note, they don't read them as much. This is my take, and this is what I've just seen from the data. Anyone in the chat can bring up what they believe, but this is just based on just the facts of what I've seen across the board in training multiple clients. We've seen the blank note seems to get more of an acceptance rate. You have to make sure your headline's on point, and it's not like, hey, I'm Mr. or Mrs. Sales Rep here. You just got to make sure you have the right context. So that, I want to answer that question. We can go back to it if we need to, but let's talk about the technology, right? Yeah. So I'm a sales rep. I need to reach out. I need to start getting meetings. What tech should I have? So these are the 3 main tech pieces that you should have. And if you don't have them, then you're going to be in a really bad spot. So number 1 is your CRM. Mm-hmm. I don't know which one you want to pick, but there's a lot, right? But pick one, because you got to make sure you can hold all the conversations you're having.
Pick Nutshell.
Yeah. Right? Pick whatever we want. Nutshell, while we're here, but you got to have one. Number 2 is the sales engagement tool. So sales off, outreach, yes, where there's a ton of them, but you need to be able to organize your steps. There's a lot going on. You might forget. So you need to have that. And then 3 is the data tool itself. So Zoom info. I mean, there's a lot of them. Clearbit, like there's a lot, Lucia, and that allows you to figure out what are my direct dials, what's my email addresses. If you have those 3, then you will be fine. Now, an add-on I'd say is LinkedIn Sales Navigator. If your buyers live on LinkedIn, that is an absolute must, but I'm not going to add it as a mandatory because some people may not have that. But the 3 I gave you are mandatory for all sales reps across the board, all sales leaderships that have that. If not, it's just going to be incredibly tough to be productive in this marketplace.
Right. You know, something that everyone watching this should take to heart is this idea that visibility creates opportunity. You did this with the SDR Chronicles, right? If a salesperson is out there, they're regularly posting content on LinkedIn, they're doing conference appearances like this one. Now you're not just some random guy trying to sell me something. You have some cachet. You've built up some trust, right? So what should every salesperson be doing in terms of building their own personal brand on LinkedIn or wherever, any other social channels? Let's say they're starting from zero. They just have a job doing sales.
Yep.
What should they do first?
So I'm gonna ask you a question. When you think of brand, what do you think? Like, what comes to mind?
That's the way a company treats their customers. That's brand.
So when I think about brand as a rep, I think about what's your reputation, right? And exactly like you said, like, how do I treat my customers? How do I treat partners, people in my industry, etc.? I think what's happening is that when people think about personal brand, they have to go create a YouTube channel like I did, or a podcast, or a new TV show, or whatever it is. They want to go on Twitter, whatever they want to do. I think it's not to that degree.
Yeah.
All you need to do is make sure you have a strong reputation in your industry, in your space. So replace personal brand and just call it reputation. Now, to answer the question, how do you have a strong reputation? Well, number 1 is start reading industry insights and listening to industry leaders and listening into their podcasts. That's number 1, because if you start listening to the podcasts and the insights, you can use those insights that you learn to be a curator, not a creator. Now that's really important, because a lot of people, when they think of brand, they're like, I got to go be a creator. All I'm asking for you to do is be a curator. Now, for context, a curator is someone who takes content and adds their context to it. Hey, I listened to this podcast and these are the 3 main takeaways I got. Hey, I read this blog post in this industry and this is the takeaways I got. That is where we should be focused on as a whole as sales reps. So if I was coming in new, I had no content, I had nothing, no one knew who I was, I would focus on being a curator, and I focus on building my reputation by 1, studying industry insights, going to the podcast interviews and listening to them, going to events if I can do that as well. And then also on top of all of that is to start going in Slack communities that I can and just sharing and asking questions. By you doing that and showing up consistently, that will help build your reputation and ultimately get you in a really good spot as a sales rep.
Yeah. Of course, there's something to be said too about being a creator in a unique way. I mean, I've seen you post links to Twitch streams on LinkedIn. I know Muffins with Morgan is also hosted on Twitch, but this is primarily a gaming platform. So this is kind of a new thing.
Yeah.
Is there business value to having people tune in and watch you play video games?
So there is, because now it creates another relation point. And someone might really vibe with a game that I'm playing, and that builds a strong relationship that could then eventually turn into a business relationship, right? So absolutely, there's value in it. It's the reason why I've started to share more openly on things that I do outside of work that I just normally don't talk about. What it does is it makes you more human and more relatable. And the more human and relatable you can be, the more people want to work with you, right? Because you're selling you're selling that person on you as much as you're selling them on the service and the product. So the more that you're bought into me as the person, then what I'm offering is the add-on bonus to whatever I'm talking to you about. So being on Twitch, sharing the games I'm playing, building a community over there builds another element and perspective that you may not have on maybe other individuals who may or not doing these things.
I'd like to pull the conversation back to a more traditional outreach method, which is cold email. That's a channel of choice for a lot of sellers in the B2B game. It's something we talk about all the time at Nutshell. So I want to get some of your insights about this stuff. So first of all, what are some mistakes that you often see SDRs make when it comes to sending out cold emails?
The biggest mistake is they don't read the emails out loud themselves.
Yeah.
That's actually the biggest mistake. For everyone here on the call, whether you're a sales rep, sales leader, enablement, heck, even if you're in marketing, ask your reps to read their email out loud and then ask them this question: would you respond to that? And you'll notice people are like, I wouldn't. It's like, okay, so you sent this email 100 times. So why?
Yeah.
Part of that leads to laziness, number one. Two, that leads to bad coaching. So on the frontline manager perspective. And three is it leads into basically being a metric zombie, and you're just sending out emails because they told you to, and you're not being thoughtful. You want to be successful in this. It's about being genuinely curious and then also being thoughtful throughout that. Yeah. So that's number one, because if you do that, then you start cutting it down. Now, let's give you just the facts here is that if you want highly successful emails, you want it to be around 2 to 5 sentences. You want to make sure that you get rid of this saying that I'm on a crusade to end. Hope all is well. Hope you're doing great. Hope you're staying safe in these unprecedented times. If I see any of these, I don't even open the email, because like I know that this is another cadence sequence email that's pretty much getting sent out. Mm-hmm. So also as well, William put this in here. I would say every single email that you put out, which was going to be my final point, you need to always think that it's going to be read on a mobile device. Even if it isn't, I don't really care. You always want to say, hey, look, if I send this on a phone, are they going to be able to read it in less than 2 scrolls? If that's not the case, you need to redo your email. So that exercise I said at the beginning will knock out a lot of the tactics and the tips I gave you on the follow-up.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to highlight the first thing you said, because I think that applies to every piece of copy an organization publishes. Read it out loud. If that doesn't compel you, you're in trouble. Yep. You just got to redo it. The great Cynthia Barnes opened up our show, and she's the one who got me using the phrase, different is better than better. What can you do in a cold email that's different enough to make someone pay attention?
Yeah, this is fantastic. Well, I'll add a phrase on top of that. First and foremost is be brief, be brilliant, be gone.
Love it.
So when you're thinking about an email, that's what you have to be looking at. I'm not trying to be long-winded. I'm not sending you a novel. This isn't the next Harry Potter, right? I'm just trying to get to the point. Now, how can you stand out? Now, one of the best ways that you can stand out is looking at your subject line. And I'll give you all this subject line. I think I can actually type in here, so I'll put it in here if we need to. So if you use this subject line, we've seen high open rates. So this is a way to be unique. So it's their first name, greater than less than sign, and then the company you work at, and putting that name.
That's a good one.
Now, so all you're gonna do is their first name, greater than less than sign, and then in my case, I put JB Sales. So this will help increase the open rates. I think a big piece of that is you see the greater than less than sign. It acts as a connector from my understanding of what people told me. So that's why it's so great. Now, how do you stand out in the emails? A lot of it comes down to being thoughtful. It comes down to an art form. So there isn't a, hey, put this exact thing every single time to be successful. What I will say is make sure you're adding interest call to action. So would you be open to learning more? Are you curious for a deeper dialogue? It's going back to not directly asking for time. But another thing that you can do to truly stand out in your emails is starting out the email with I can imagine. So Gong has data on this. When you say I could imagine, it gets the person to visualize whatever you're telling them. So in that moment, as they read the email, they're basically visualizing it and seeing it in a different way than maybe the other ones they get. So I can imagine as a whatever the role is, or I can imagine as I was reading your X, right? The whole goal here is finding information that you can contextualize and spin it into a value prop. That's how you can be unique and different. And the thing is that you're not going to get every single person to respond, but in my Muffins with Morgan segments, I'll bring in CEOs and VPs and we'll go through their emails. And it's like 15, 16 pages of emails. And we only get 1 or 2 emails that are on B or A level. The rest of them are C+ and below. So the reason I'm telling you all that is the barrier of entry to be personalized is actually not that high. You just have to be willing to put in the work and manage your time.
I hear you. There's something else that we always advocate at Nutshell is the use of personal email sequences. So you deploy your first cold email and then a series of follow-ups go out automatically until the prospect responds. Any seller these days who's even like halfway sophisticated use a variation of this, some sort of personal email sequencing tool. Is there anything else that SDRs should be saying in these follow-up emails besides, hey, reaching out again, just trying to get some time in your calendar. It's me again, looking to connect. What should that email series flow actually feel like?
So when you're going through the series flow, are you talking about the cadence and the sequence flow, just so I have an understanding there?
Yeah, you have your first initial outreach. They don't get back to you. Something else goes out in 3 days. What should that say? If they don't get back to that one, something else goes out another 3 days. What should that say?
Yeah. So Christy, I mean, that's phenomenal if you have an 80% open rate. And that might be like on tier 2s or tier 1s. I might be imagining there, Christine. So industry standard, and then I'll go through the sequence flow. Industry standard on open rates is 20 to 25%. So if you're higher than that, then you're good. So you're well beyond that. So what I would say is there's so many different lanes you can go with outbound. And even within markets, it's also going to be so many different lanes you could go within that. I'll give you just a common stance example of what you can do. So typically an outbound campaign is 8 to 12 touches. And 80% of the responses you get in a campaign are in the first 5 steps. So you want to make sure your first 5 steps stand out. So within that, I run one of the campaigns, because I had a lot, but I'll run an 11 touch campaign in 20 business days. So my flow would be day 1 is a LinkedIn connection request. We already talked about that. Day 2, I send an email. That email normally is based on the persona or super personalized based on what tiering that is in. 2, it's like 3 sentences. The first one is, I use the greater than less than sign. By the way, that's my first touch subject line. Then day 3, I do a call voicemail. This is unique though. The same day I send an email. So I'm doing call voicemail. I don't reference a failed attempt because that's a waste of your time. They didn't see it, so it doesn't matter. Then I'm going to talk about, hey, I'm about to send you an email in the next 5 minutes. That email goes out the same day, which increases reply rates. Remember, I said the first 5 steps, so I'm coming in pretty hot, right? So I've already done 4 touches there in like 3 days. Then day 5 is another call. Day 7 is another call. Day 10 is an email. Day 12 is a call. Day 15, email. Day 20 is an email. So within that, I said 11. So it's like 5 videos, 5 emails, 5 calls, 1 social touch. But I add an additional social touch. If they connect, there's a video within that sequence or cadence. So once they accept me, I wait 2 days later to send the video. So that's where that 11th touch comes into play. So I add that variant. For voicemails, because some people may be wondering, I leave 2 max. So 1 at the beginning and then 1 at the last call. The rest of those are ghost calls. So That's like a typical campaign that I'll run. Everyone obviously is different depending on market and things of that nature, but that's how I go about it.
No, that's great stuff. And I want to just go back to what you just said about, using a video at the end, because I've seen you post this take on LinkedIn as well about using personalized video in cold emails. A lot of people use these right away in their first touch. And this is kind of like the new traditional wisdom, but you don't think personalized video should be used for the initial contact. At least you've said so in the past. So why is that? And what are you using it for?
So this is where some people disagree with me on this one. Yet doing a video on your first touch leads to some obstacles. Number one is now you're going up against spam, firewalls, getting blacklisted. So you have to put a link in your email in order for people to click the video. So I want to get rid of that immediately. That's number one. Number two is I don't want to come out the gate so hot with the video and we have never talked before. I want to warm them up with my voicemails, my emails, my connection requests. So I want to stay away from that. Also, three is over time, video becomes easier, yet it still takes time to do them. So if you do a first touch video for every single person, you're going to get video fatigue and not want to do video moving forward. So those are the reasons why I say don't do video on the initial touch. Wait till later, you've warmed them up, and now you can get more response and you get more meetings.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to quickly cover one more topic before we start getting into some audience questions.
Yep.
And that's cold calling. And, I don't want to insult anybody watching this by saying, hey, cold calling is dead, but it's largely being replaced by a lot of these digital methods of communication that we've been talking about. So do you think there's any value in cold calling in 2021? Can it still be done well?
Insane value. It can be done well. And my take on if anyone ever calls anything dead, we have to look up the definition of dead, right? And the definition of dead is that it's not moving. It's done. It's over. That means it does not work. It's not breathing, right? So I still talk to clients and they're getting meetings off cold calling. So it can't be dead, right? It's still alive, right? But now you just have to adjust. And what do I mean by adjusting? You can't just come with a generic pitch. You can't have a generic talk track. You can even look at data from like HubSpot data if you can go look at it, and it's actually showing how the calling connects have started to go up over time, and email reply rates have gone drastically down all the way to negative 35%. So, and me telling you that email you should be talking about might be dying over there. But
interesting.
It's based on the data, right? If you look at it. So let's talk about the calling then. When it comes to calling, we have to make sure that we are coming with a very thoughtful and powerful introduction and understand who are we talking to. Study your personas, study your industry, study the markets. It's under leveraged because most people are just afraid to pick up the phone, right? So now, right, when I'm going to make this call, then this is an intro that we've seen to be successful during this time. And we've had people schedule multiple meetings from it. I have one person they scheduled over 20 meetings from the intro. So again, it's just about pattern interrupts and breaking through the noise.
Yeah.
So if I'm making a call to you, Ben, I'd be like, hi, Ben, thanks for taking my call. Look, I'm calling out the blue here. However, do you have a few moments to chat? So what that does is now I've set up a pattern interrupt. I said, thanks for taking my call. Then on the follow-up there, I'm saying, hey, I know I'm calling it the blue, I'm acknowledging it, and then I have an upfront contract. However, do you have a few moments to chat? And the reason that works is because I didn't introduce myself. I want to see, do they even want to have this conversation with me? And once they agree to it, then I can naturally move into the value prop. And we've seen that to be really successful. And then you just got to know what is your value prop based on the persona. And now you're in a really great conversation. So a lot of it comes down to the fact that most people are just not willing to pick up the phone. And because not a lot of people are doing it, it's a great time to do it more. You just have to do it right.
Right. Last question on that from just a tactical perspective. Are there any major differences in messaging between a cold email and a cold call? Are you trying to convey the same information in the same order, or is the strategy, fundamentally different in some way?
The order and the formula are pretty much the same. The attention is a cold call intro versus a subject line. The interest part is, what research have you done about that persona or that market, similar to you have for your email? Your desire, the value props are essentially the same. And the call to action is, I want to get a meeting. The difference is that on the phone, it's the most controllable aspect you have, and you can add tone to it. I can add inflections to the call. I can handle objections better because we're live and I'm not getting them on an email. So the channels and how you deliver it and the context is the only difference here. But the formula, if you think about it, is pretty much the same.
Got it. That's all I've got for you, Morgan. I think we might have answered all the audience questions as well. Is that right?
I think we had a couple that we did answer. I don't know if anyone has any more. We can obviously get into them.
If you see any you like, I don't see any coming in here on my end. Let's put a bow on it there. Yeah, we're almost at our hour anyway. But look, thanks so much for being here with us, Morgan. Please follow Morgan J. Ingram on LinkedIn. For some reason you don't already, go to muffinswithmorgan.com. Be notified about his next live Q&As on Twitch. Morgan, is there anywhere else people should go to learn from you or keep track of the things you're doing over at Jay Barrow's sales training?
Yeah, so I have a new podcast called that came out. It's called the One Up Formula, and I took a different spin than my other podcast, was the SDR Chronicles, which was sales related. I wanted to really focus on what should we be doing outside of our careers in life to be successful. Like, what are people doing in the morning and afternoon? So that's what the podcast is about. We get really deep in the conversations and we talk about all sorts of stuff I've learned: yoga, meditation, meaningful relationships. How do you make sure that you're blocking out your time? How to get mentors, real life things. So that's the podcast that recently came out. And if you guys are interested, you can go check it out.
For sure. Well, thanks again for your time, Morgan. We really appreciate you being here. And thanks to all the viewers who joined us for this one. And stick around. There are more great sessions from Boundless 2021 just ahead.